Thank you for joining us today for this talk on South Asia Press. It's a recent initiative that I've launched. The idea behind South Asia Press is to talk about issues that focus on Pakistan and in relation to Pakistan with South Asia. And basically we do underreported stories from Pakistan, and also at the same time we do these talks that have just started recently. Today's talk is going to be focusing on the issue of Pashtuns. The title of the talk is Pashtuns under attack. It's a question that we're trying to answer today in this discussion. The idea is to talk about issues that the Pashtuns are facing right now in Pakistan, and across the border in Afghanistan, perhaps also because they're very interlinked. We're going to be focusing on the persecution of Pashtuns. We're going to be focusing on the issue of the Chaman killings that we've been hearing about, but there's been a media blackout about it. We're going to be talking about also the Waziristán target killings that we have seen a very dangerous rising trend in, and the return of militancy in the tribal belt. Another issue that we will be discussing will be the Pashtun politics right now, and the Pashtun question of Pashtun politics vis-a-vis the Pashtun Tahfuz movement, the future of Pashtun Tahfuz movement, and the other Pashtun political groups that are present in Pakistan. For all of this and more, we are joined by three guests from Pakistan. They are all Pakistani, but some of us are living abroad, of course. We have with us Mr. Afrasiab Khattak, who's a senator and a political activist, and is a keen observer of Pashtun affairs in the country. We also have with us Bushra Gohar Sahiba, who is a former parliamentarian. She's a women's rights activist. She also follows Pashtun issues, especially human rights issues from Pashtun region, very closely. And then we have with us Gulalai Ismail, who is right now living in exile. She's an exile rights activist, a Pashtun rights activist. She's been part of the Pashtun Tahfuz movement when in Pakistan, and even right now she's actively part of it in the US where she's living. She used to, back in Pakistan, she used to run an organization called Aware Girls, which was focusing on women and girls issues and in the Pashtun area. Just right as I begin with right into it, I would like to ask you, Mr. Afrasiab Saab, that we're seeing that I was reading up on your tweets, and I was reading up on the sort of social media chatter that has been going on about Chaman, and we keep hearing about Chaman border, and we keep hearing that there are tensions when crossing that border. This is a border that the Pashtuns use from going from Afghanistan to Pakistan and Pakistan to Afghanistan. The traders use it. Right now, we're hearing that there's a lot of tensions there. There was a sit-in also. There's been some killings. What are you hearing, and what do you know that you can tell us about what's going on there?
Well, thank you very much, first of all, to invite us for this talk. Yes, things are very bad in Chaman, and it is not only in Chaman. It is all along the Duran line, for more than 2,000 kilometers long Duran line, which was drawn by Britishers in 19th century. Unfortunately, Pashtuns have been at the receiving end of colonial policies and the fascistic and dictatorial policies of successive Pakistani governments later on. You see, from the last 40 years, Pashtun have been in the eye of storm because of this war in Afghanistan was fought from the Pashtun lands inside Pakistan. And this war has gone on and on. Even today, it's going on. So these brutalities against Pashtuns in Chaman, in Waziristan, in Bajor, and in other areas are just symptoms of a deep policy of colonization, oppression, and exploitation against Pashtuns. You see, this border has been an open border, and even this Durand Treaty, which was forced on Afghanistan by British Empire, gave easement rights. The tribes could walk through the border without papers, without any restriction. But suddenly, Pakistan government has decided to in the name of border management, they are tightening control just to blackmail Pashtuns, put pressure on Afghanistan, and use the livelihood of millions of Pashtuns that come from regional trade, local trade over this border. Unfortunately, new restrictions have been imposed without any law, without consultation of the local people. So things have gone from bad to worse. And you see Taliban terrorists who are fighting a war on Pakistani soil are free to cross. Taliban's parallel government is based in Pakistan for decades. But you see the common people who go across the border to meet their relatives, to meet their tribesmen, people from the same tribe, which they have done for centuries, has suddenly been blocked. And the government has come out, Pakistani government has come down on Pashtuns very strongly. It's a naked aggression against unarmed and peaceful Pashtuns who are just raising their voice for their rights. I mean, these are legal rights which are constitutional, legal, democratic. But you see, in Chaman, people were killed one day, then another day. It was a retaliation from the frontier corps, which is ruling Balochistan. It was a retaliation to a peaceful protest meeting by Pashtun Tahfuz movement, this movement of the youth, a big rally, and then they were firing the next day, and then another day of firing. So it has gone on, and in Waziristan, of course, more than 10 people are killed in 1 week, last 1 week. So it's really very bad.
Right. You in the end, you mentioned about Waziristan, and that's something that I would like to bring in Bushra Sahiba perhaps to talk about. You have been going to, you've done some fact-finding missions in the past. You've seen that what is happening in the tribal belt. We've seen that, there's this whole talk about mainstreaming FATA and bringing it into the constitutional ambit. In your opinion and in your experience right now, and with this, these Waziristan killings and this reports that we're getting that once again the militants are resettling and are being brought in, what are you hearing? Has anything changed at all in Waziristan on the ground? Are things better now? Are things worse? Where do they stand today, Bushra Sahiba?
Thank you very much, Taha. Gulalai and I went to Khaisur to meet with the women in North Waziristan. And when we entered North Waziristan, we felt that we had entered an occupied area. So to say that it's being mainstreamed, I think that it's still militarized and it's occupied. And only, which is more concerning, and lately we see that Taliban are have been regrouping, and they're being brought back to terrorize the population, whereas anyone who raises or speaks up against this are threatened or attacked. And we saw that in Kharkamar massacre, where peaceful protesters were attacked by the military, and nobody was allowed to do fact-finding. HRCP formed a commission, but they were not allowed to go there. So they had to meet with people in Banu. Now, if FATA is to remain a black hole and totally cut off from the mainstream, it is very difficult to find facts and to be able to see what is going on. Fortunately, we have the youth movement, the PTM, that is constantly raising, and even the issue of regrouping of Taliban was first raised by the PTM leaders. But media is still quiet about it. The controlled media in Pakistan is very quiet about it. Things are not very good in FATA. I mean, it has been, the constitution has been extended, but it's still very militarized. And the number of people who've been targeted recently, it seems that the sanctuaries are still being kept, and the ordinary population is being threatened there, attacked, and the public representatives are not allowed to move freely there, and they're constantly facing false charges. So, in my opinion, it's quite concerning. Where women are concerned, at least we saw in Khesu that the women came out initially. When we went to speak with them and we came back with our fact-finding, media spokespersons, others, said that we were lying. And then ultimately, the GOC had to go and apologize to the family. So basically, I feel there's no independent media is not even allowed there. So it is still an occupied area. And now with the militants regrouping, it's very concerning, because I mean, it's still, they've suffered so much. And it seems the policies haven't changed vis-a-vis the Taliban project. So until Pakistan or Pindi closes down the Taliban project, we're not going to see peace in the region and peace in Pashtunkhwa. It's going to be a constant struggle, and it becomes quite difficult when you must have heard recently a book was also removed. I mean, if those who are suffering say anything, there's a false charge against them. If they write about it, the books are disappeared. So where do they go? I mean, even I mean, there's no justice. Where would they go? Should they go outside for justice? Because Pakistan is not willing to even listen to them. The parliament is completely silent. Mainstream political leaders are not even talking about it. And we've seen massacres happen in the past several months. And like Khattak Saab said, in the past week, more than 10 people have been targeted. So where would the Pashtuns go for justice? I mean,
right.
It's becoming quite difficult, yeah.
Right. That sort of, that brings a question to my mind, and definitely something that I would like to ask Gulalai, because, she's been part of the civil rights movement in the Pashtun areas very recently before she had to leave. She's been organizing those kind of protests abroad also in DC. Gulalai, you've been a peace activist. You've been sort of working on peace issues in the Pashtun area, in the tribal belt in Peshawar and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, and now you're out of there because of your safety reasons. But we understand that your family and your parents are there, and as Bushra Sahiba was saying, that common people are being threatened, and one of them is your father, and your mother, who have been threatened, who are being harassed. There is no sort of respite in that. And from what I was reading recently, that they had to go to the courts every day, and then the dates are extended. So there's, I mean, even if one gets out like you did, your family is back there, and they start to get harassed. And how can your parents fight back? How can common Pashtuns fight back? Is there a way to fight back with the state?
Thank you so much, Taha, for this conversation. The situation that I and my parents are facing, it is an extension of the collective punishment, which was and which is used in the former tribal areas, under especially when FATA, the ex-FATA, was under the federal crimes regulation. So for decades, it was really normal for Pakistani state authorities to use collective punishment as a tool to silence voices of dissent, to silence those who were speaking for their rights. So it was very acceptable that if one person has committed a quote unquote crime, the whole family would be punished for it. So what is happening to me and my family is just an extension of the policies which has been used for decades against the Pashtuns. And the way I see that why such the policies of connective punishments had been used against Pashtun was to strategically keep Pashtuns away from their constitutional rights, from their constitutional right to justice, and to keep the ex-FATA, the former tribal areas, as a safe haven for harboring terrorist organizations, for harboring terrorism. We had seen that the land of Pashtuns and Pashtuns had been used as cannon fodder for the strategic wars of Pakistan. For as Afrasiab Khattak mentioned as well, that even in the 80s, the region was used as a launching pad to send Taliban, to send militants to Afghanistan, and for that, not only that, the land was used, and the Pashtuns were the young people of Pashtuns were used. Religious fundamentalism, religious extremism was also strategically promoted in the Pashtun areas to make recruitment in the militant organizations easier. So not only a physical war has been brought to Pashtun land, also a war of narratives has been brought on Pashtun lands, and I see that with the biggest damage that has been done to us is the promotion of extremist narratives. So yeah, and now once again we're seeing that what worries us is once again the militant organizations are regrouping in the former tribal areas, in the Pashtun areas. Once again, even after billions of dollars were invested in the name of counter-terrorism operations, in the name of ending terrorism and terrorist organizations, but what we had seen that the actual terrorists and terrorist organizations, they were given safety. People like Ehsanullah Ehsan, who had been the spokesperson of Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, he was kept as a guest by the GHQ. He was given a really good accommodation, and he was given safe exit out of Pakistan. On the other hand, we had seen that people who are raising voice against terrorism, they are being killed. So the PTM activists have been reporting that even after Zarb-e-Azab, there had been more than 270 incidents of target killing in the former tribal areas, and not in a single case of these target killings, either an FIR has been registered, or the killers have been found, or justice has been served. So hundreds of people are getting killed in target killing, and it also includes women. Recently, we had seen that how a woman was killed in the middle of a very populated and crowded market. She was a health worker. She was taken out of the rickshaw, and she was shot. So, but have we ever seen that someone has been put on trial for committing target killing? No. And this is no, and we are worried because we had seen it happening a decade ago. We had seen it happening that hundreds of tribal elders were killed because they could see that a war was brought on the Pashtun land. So hundreds of them were killed. Now, once again, when our elders are getting killed in target killing, we are very clear that it is dawn of a new war on Pashtun land, and the international community has to respond to our resistance, because for the very first time thousands of young people are resisting non-violently, and they're trying to reach out to the world to see that what's happening. So I think it's now the responsibility of the international community as well to respond to the international crisis that is happening on our land.
Right. I will come to the international sort of role of international community in just a bit. But Afrasiab Saab, if I could bring you in here and talk about Pashtun politics and what we're seeing in the contemporary sort of Pashtun politics arena. We're seeing that, as you mentioned rightly, that there's this youth movement, which is the Pashtun Tahfuz movement, and which is rising, but there's a lot of persecution of them too. We know Mohsin Davar, who's part of that, and Ali Wazir, who's part of that, are part of the parliament now, but we've seen how they have been persecuted. They were even in jail, and they were mistreated. You visited them at that time, during that time too. And now we're recently seeing that, there is this, the Pakistan Democratic Movement, the PDM, which at first invited the PTM, or invited Mohsin Davar for that matter, and then backed out of it, or seems like there was a fallout. Is the Pashtun Tahaffuz movement and the Pashtun politics, I mean, there are other political parties which are Pashtun based, like the ANP is part of the PDM. Do you think that the PDM it could be a good platform for Pashtun politics, or do you think that it's not doing enough? How do you see the whole PTM versus PDM sort of scenario unfolding in Pakistan?
Am I to respond to the question?
Yes, please, Afrasiab.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Actually, Pashtun Tahaffuz movement is an indigenous uprising led by young people. It is against the brutal oppression faced by Pashtuns in general, and Pashtuns who are close to Divine Line, the former federally administered tribal area of Fatah. People were bombed, people were killed by terrorists, and they were also killed in military operations for decades. And they were displaced. Millions of them were displaced. You see, when you talk of IDPs in that area, internally displaced persons, people say no. It means intentionally displaced Pashtuns, IDP, because they believe they are victims of the state policies. And they describe the state policy with three Ds: death, destruction, and displacement. That is what has been meted out to the population in this area. So the response was Pashtun Tahaffuz movement, a movement which boldly raised the issues of death and destruction. Political parties were shy of these things. They were not saying a word about these problems. Thousands of people had disappeared, enforced disappearances. So Pashtun Tahaffuz movement raised the issues of war, the issues of displacement, the issues of landmine killings, and also the issues faced by Pashtuns in Karachi and other parts of Pakistan. So, and this movement was able to break fear. Before PTM, nobody could name the military as the perpetrator of oppression against people in general and Pashtuns in particular. But PTM sort of introduced a bold narrative of speaking out to power. So PTM was attacked by the government, but it has it stood its ground. They were arrested, tortured. Many of them were killed, but they still stick to their position. So I think it's an organization which has not just raised the problems of Pashtuns, but it has also broken fear in Pakistan. It has inspired all the oppressed people in all the 4 provinces of Pakistan. But you see, the political parties in Pakistan Democratic Movement do not seem to be, many of them do not seem to be comfortable with PTM, because many of them would not like to spoil the chances of their future power by standing up with PTM and challenging the hybrid martial law in clear terms. So that is the problem with opposition parties. And some of them are also afraid of the popularity of PTM. For example, Mohsin Dawar and Ali Wazir, two prominent leaders of PTM who contested elections as independent candidates, were able to defeat parties of religious type parties, such as led by Maulana Fazlur Rahman and others. So those parties are afraid of the strength of PTM, both politically and also in terms of popularity. Mohsin Dawar was invited. He addressed public meetings in Karachi, and he also participated in PDM meetings. But then some parties ganged up against him, and then he was what Maulana Fazlur Rahman said was expelled, so-called expulsion. But I believe PTM is a very popular movement, very strong movement. It can rally thousands of people at very short notice. So I think ultimately any democratic movement in Pakistan, any genuine democratic movement, won't be complete without inclusion of PTM. And the common people everywhere in Pakistan would sort of like PTM to be part of this movement. So let's see what happens. But I don't think any strong struggle in Pakistan, popular struggle at people's level, grassroots level, is possible without support from movements like Pashtun Tahfuz movement.
Right. Thank you for that. A bit of sort of a very comprehensive background into the PTM and where it stands within the mainstream politics arena. Bushra Sahiba, if I would like to ask you, a lot of people ask this, and when I was organizing this talk, also a lot of people sent this question to me. Everybody keeps wondering that will PTM materialize into a political party which will go into the parliament as a political party, which will have political offices, which will, right now it's in that place where it's considered as a movement. Do you think that eventually the PTM has to convert itself into a political party, or that's not needed?
Well, that is something that PTM can respond to. And I think you need to invite Manzoor, Ali, and Mohsin Dawar and others. I can only say that PTM has already done quite a lot. In just 2 years, it has actually set the bar very high for most of the political parties. And it has given courage to many of the leaders also. So now they set the tone for a lot of the, rights, the questions that they're asking. You find that many of the political leaders start echoing those questions that they raise. So personally, I feel that they've already done quite a lot. This movement will continue. And since things are changing very fast in the region, we're already seeing the Doha deal and all that is going on, changes in the US. It is it's needed right now. The political parties or the political leaders who have actually, in my opinion, surrendered completely to Pindi for just a piece in the power pie, feel insecure when the youth leaders are raising questions and challenging status quo. So the reason Mohsin Dawar was not welcomed in the PDM, and he was opposed mainly by Pashtun leaders, clearly shows that they feel insecure, that Mohsin Dawar is talking about the right to life and constitutional rights, whereas the other leaders are focusing more on the puppet show, and they want one puppet to be removed so that they can replace the present puppet. So I think that PTM is a reality. It is up to them if they want to ultimately convert into a political party. But I personally feel that as a movement also, it has been very strong and very effective, and it has shaken the Pindi's narrative quite a lot. Pindi has had to threaten and also explain constantly. And so I feel that the youth, it was needed also because there was a vacuum. Fatah has been suffering for decades, and nobody was actually speaking for what is going on. Khattak Saab talked about the 3 Ds. There's also another D, which is the disappearances. And that is something that PTM is also questioning. There are thousands and thousands of people who've been picked up. And similarly, the extrajudicial killing continues, but nobody has the courage to speak up. I mean, if political leaders are unable to question and say, why have so many people been disappeared or targeted, and what is going on? Why aren't the FIRs being registered? We don't even know what happened in the operations. So that is what the PTM is bringing to the mainstream. They're telling the world and the rest of Pakistan what went on in these so-called operations, or how their lives were turned upside down by bringing in these militants, giving them safe sanctuaries. And the other thing is that, you see, for the Pashtuns, it is going to be very difficult, because most of us would like, we're tired of war, and we've resisted, put up quite a lot of resistance. But Pakistan, or mainstream Pakistan, would rather show us as, the Taliban as represented the Pashtuns, which is an insult to all the Pashtuns who've suffered so much. And that is why I think that the PTM is basically bringing stories of the victims of war, and saying that their only demand is right to life, and that their constitutional rights should be respected. I mean, that is something, your question, you'll have to put it to the PTM.
Definitely, we will try to get Manzoor or Mohsin or Ali on air here on South Asia Press. We have around over 130 people live right now, and we have a lot of questions coming in. So I've been asking those questions also within the questions that I'm asking. One of the things that, but continuing on Pashtun politics, I would like to ask you, and Gulalai, bring you in. And perhaps get your point of view on, this sort of from the outside, because I've been reporting in the area. I've reported from the tribal belt, from the Pashtun region, from Afghanistan. But I mean, I'm not from the region, so my observation is from the outside. You have grown within that community. You are one of the young leaders of the Pashtun sort of movements and the Pashtun Tahfuz movement. You were part of it, very integral part. You still are. Sometimes besides Afrasiab Sahab or Bushra Sahiba and some other Pashtun leadership that we've seen that has risen above all of this, we've seen that mostly the Pashtun mainstream leadership that is in Peshawar, or that is, the older generation of the Pashtun leadership, that's been a disappointment in some ways. Do you think so? Do you think that they were a disappointment? Do you think that they should have done more? They should have been much. They've been the ones that have been facing this for a longer time. but we're seeing a younger generation coming out and giving courage to the elders. How do you see all of this?
Taha, I think that it's not a black and white question. That the Pashtun leadership, I cannot say that they have been a disappointment, because we have learned and we have been able to understand what's happening in our area, despite that the media has been totally in control of the Pakistani state authorities. Besides of the fact that FATA was kept as a black hole, the tribal areas were kept as a black hole of information, and most of us were even not able to go there and see what's happening. It was not on mainstream media, but even then we had been connected with the issues of our soil, because there was I would say because there was a strong Pashtun nationalist politics and political parties, and they have also suffered a lot. For example, we have seen that Awami National Party has lost thousands of its workers to the terrorism, and we had also seen the role they have been played an important constitutional milestone such as 18th Amendment. So there is not a black and white answer that they have been a complete disappointment. Yes, the recent role is quite disappointing for us. By them participating in the race to become puppets is very disappointing for us, and I as an activist think that they have betrayed the cause for which they had given so much sacrifice, for which they have sacrificed thousands of its workers. Now they have betrayed the cause. Now they are betraying the Pashtuns, and I think they need to revise their strategies, and they need to understand that their place is not in the puppet race. Their place is not in the race to be selected. Their place is in raising the issues of Pashtuns. For example, in the recent PDM Jalsa, we had seen Bushra. Gohar Sahib already talked about how, and Afrasiab Khattak Sahib also spoke about how Mohsin Dawood was expelled from PTM because the political parties who are part of the alliance, they felt insecure from the popularity that Mohsin Dawood has. So they were insecure from his popularity, and he was expelled. So that was disappointing. And then we saw that in the PTM recent Jalsa, the issues of North Waziristán and Chaman were not even highlighted. So we would have really liked a new war, as we have been saying again and again, that Taliban are regrouping in the Pashtun areas. The situation on the Durand line is extremely bad. The borders keep on getting closed. There had been recently more than many people were killed on the Chaman border. So we would like these nationalist parties to take ownership of the Pashtun issues and highlight it from their platform and take a stand for it. But however, and also reflecting on your question, which you asked about the future of PTM. I think the way I see that PTM is going to stay as a movement, as a non-violent movement. However, PTM is generating, and through PTM, we have seen that young leadership is emerging. So many leaders not just at the very mainstream level, such as Mohsin Dawood or Ali Wazir, but also at local level, new leaders are emerging. And I think that these leaders will eventually end up in the parliament or in the district councils, in the provincial assemblies. They are going to end up there, and it's really up to the political parties to fill the vacuum. There's a huge political vacuum. By political vacuum, I mean to say that the political parties, especially in the Pakhtunkhwa, they are not addressing the issues of the grassroots people, such as issues of displacement, such as issues of enforced disappearances, such as issues of such as people who are displaced and have not yet been able to go back, issues of target killing, and the impunity that the forces that the Pakistani authorities enjoy over it. So if the mainstream political parties decide that they will stay silent because they want to appease the military establishment, and because they want to have as Bushra Gohar said, a pie in the power, a piece in the power pie. So if they decide that they will continue this policies of appeasing the selector, appeasing the army, so that they can have a share in the power. So if that attitude does not change, the political vacuum will stay there, and that political vacuum will be filled by someone. If not by PTM, other forces will definitely arise and fill this vacuum. So if these political parties, they don't want any more competition, I believe if they don't like any more further competition and division of their vote bank, then they should start thinking seriously about their narratives, their policies, and their commitment towards citizens and towards the people. Thank you.
Right. Afrasiab Saab, if we talk about, we've detailed the Pashtun politics on this side of the border. There is definitely on the other side also, there's a lot of connections that Pashtuns have with Pakistan. And then as Bushra Sahiba mentioned, the Doha talks, we're seeing things are happening on the Afghanistan side. One of the things that I wanted to sort of focus on, and we've talked about this earlier also, was this return of the militancy, and we've touched upon it a little bit, but I would like to touch upon it a little bit more. You mentioned last time that we see every time that in Afghanistan, when we see the militants rising, we see in Pakistan also the militants rising and becoming more prominent. Can you, to our viewers and to people who are watching right now, explain us to this idea of the Pakistani Taliban and the Afghan Taliban, and this, how does that all fit into this Pashtun region and the politics in the region?
You see, throughout the 19th and 20th century, we have seen that big powers have used small nations or oppressed nations in different ways, and even their religions have been used. For example, there was struggle between Tsarist Russia and British Empire, then Soviet Union and United States-led Western powers. So you see, this jihad in Afghanistan in 1980s was basically aimed at defeating the Soviet Union by the West. But within this strategy, with this grand strategy, Pakistani generals had their own small strategy. They called it the strategic depth. It was basically to resolve the so-called Pashtun question by deconstructing Pashtun identity. And this project, which was first Mujahideen, later on it became Taliban. So Project Taliban basically is a demolition squad let loose at Afghanistan as a state and a nation, and also Pashtuns in Pakistan. That's why it is not a coincidence that the Taliban who fought against Afghan state and Afghan society, they also killed Pashtun nationalists in Pakistan. For example, Awami National Party, a major nationalist Pashtun party, lost more than 1,000 workers to terrorist attacks. You see, this party was not fighting against anyone, but you see, this is part of the Project Taliban. In Pakistan, Pashtuns have always stood for federal democracy, independent foreign policy, and sort of good relations with neighboring countries. This has been Pashtun nationalist politics. But you see, unfortunately, Pakistani government, different governments have pushed them to the wall. And the more Pakistan is militarized, the more Pashtuns come at the receiving end, because Pashtuns are used as cannon fodder for these adventures in Afghanistan and in the region. We are afraid that a new game plan is being prepared. They are talking of a new Cold War. This time it can be between United States and China. And this can be fought in our region, unfortunately. And some people are trying to use Pashtuns once again as cannon fodder. That's why Talibans are being imposed in Afghanistan. So this Doha process is sort of not a process for peace and reconciliation. It's for American withdrawal, and it's also a preparation for a new Cold War. That's why Talibans are being imposed in Afghanistan. And in Pakistan, the terrorist structures are not being dismantled. There are no reforms. For example, reforms for syllabus, reforms of the policies of Ziaul's period. They are still going on. Even today, as we are speaking, militancy and extremism are sort of unchallenged in Pakistan. And different governments have refused, particularly this government has been brought to just whitewash Talibanism and Talibanization. You see, it's not just Taliban, it's Talibanization, which is sort of pushing the society back and pushing Pashtuns back into dark ages. just to use them as cannon fodder in different parts of the world. So it's a very serious situation, and Doha process in its present form is not going to lead to any happy solution. I think we've seen that bloodshed in Afghanistan has risen, and with that we have seen growth of Talibanization on east of the dividend line, in Waziristán, in Bajor, Mouvement, and other areas, and we have seen the ascendancy of militancy on our side of the border. Women are being discouraged from social mobility. Similarly, young people are discouraged from music. For example, in marriages, they say you can't have music. So these things, this Talibanization, if it comes to Afghanistan, it will definitely come to the Pashtuns in Pakistan also. So that's why people would resist the policies of government of Pakistan to impose Project Taliban on Afghanistan and on Pashtuns in Pakistan.
Right. Keeping with that thought, Bushra Sahiba, this idea that Pashtuns are resisting, and we see that the Pashtun Tahfuz movement is somewhat of a manifestation of that resistance from the Pashtun youth. Besides the Pashtun Tahfuz movement, how can the Pashtuns fight this back? As we're seeing that the picture that we're seeing in the foreseeable future, we're seeing that there might be another Cold War between China and the US, and Pashtun regions might again become a place for proxy wars, as we've seen during the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s. How else and how much, what else can the Pashtuns do? Earlier you were also mentioning that, there was the book written in Pakistan and it's been banned and things like that. The Pashtuns are persecuted in the country. There's no respite for them. There's no justice for them. What can be done? Internationally, should we raise the voice? Is there a way to internationally build pressure on these players who are trying to use Pashtuns as cannon fodder, as Afrasiab just put it?
Well, first of all, I think the political leaders have to take some responsibility, which we feel that they're not taking it. So much has happened. The Doha deal is really, like Khattak Saab also said, is a US withdrawal plan, and in my opinion, to give legitimacy to Taliban and to impose Taliban on the Afghans. And that is why whenever you hear something about the Doha deal from Pakistan's side, they own the Taliban and they seem to be the spokespersons of the Taliban instead of talking about the people, and that is very concerning. That something is going on, and if the Taliban are imposed in Afghanistan, there's going to be a repercussion in the rest of the Pashtun belt also. So it is very important what PTM is doing, but the political leaders have to wake up also. The mainstream political leaders have a lot of responsibility, and they can't just leave things till everything goes all wrong. What we saw in the past 2-3 decades, there was so much bloodshed, and nobody is even talking about, that why did so many people die? If they're saying 70,000 were martyred on this side, then why aren't we in the parliament talking about it and saying, why did so many people become victims of war? Now, we can't just celebrate martyrdom. We have to question their families who have been displaced, and who's responsible for it. The question is, are we going to have a truth commission? We need a truth commission that should be under, in my opinion, under the UN umbrella. because so many Pashtuns have lost their lives. It can't be just a meeting or a commission organized by the puppet government or the military. It has to be an international commission, in my opinion, that needs to come and meet with all these families. Now in Pakistan, HRCP couldn't go and meet with families who lost their loved ones in Khattak massacre. So it's not going to happen. So the political leadership will have to wake up to these challenges. Civil society, human rights activists have to also step in. We can't just and then the Pashtun leaders on both sides of the Durand line will have to sit together and draw some red lines. Otherwise, we are going to have another cycle of violence. So many have lost their lives already, and we can't allow, and already you've heard about it, we have people raising funds for Fasad in Afghanistan in Peshawar. It's open. I mean, why was this puppet government brought in? The main purpose was they wanted to give offices to the Taliban. They wanted to facilitate Taliban. Under the present leadership, Ahsanullah Ahsan has been facilitated and allowed to leave the country. This is what is going to happen if this facade continues, if this puppet show continues. But is the PDM raising this issue as a priority? No. For PDM, this isn't an issue. When it comes to foreign policy, none of the political leaders is ready to question why Hindi controls foreign policy. Why is everyone going like, we still don't know what agreements have taken place in these meetings between the US Zalmay Khalilzad and the Chief of Army Staff. We don't know. There's no debate in the public about it. There's no debate in the parliament about it. We don't have a committee that is looking into what is going on in Doha or what is going on in these meetings that are taking place. So the civilian government is a puppet. So many people have been killed. Tahir Dawar, an SP of the police, where is the report? Who has been held responsible for a daylight abduction of an SP? So I think that civil society will have to do a lot. Unfortunately, the media here is also controlled. And anyone who talks about human rights, rights of the Pashtuns, they're targeted and there are false FIRs against them. It is very difficult to speak up right now for rights. I've never seen things to be this bad. I mean, we've been working on human rights for years. It has never been this bad. Anyone who, I mean, if I question state's policy, I'm told to leave the country. I mean, what kind of engagement is this? That, we can't. And then political parties have surrendered and they're being micromanaged from Pindi. They're taking orders. Parliament, we've already seen, is under the influence. So where do you go? I mean, where is this debate going to take place? I mean, I'm glad that the social media provides some space, but that is also being restricted. And the attacks that are going on, it's almost impossible. So we are heading towards a very difficult period. I see a cycle of violence and Pashtuns being used as cannon fodder again. But and we can't leave it to, you see, we all have to stand with the PTM. We have to support them because they're under continuous, their families are being targeted. Look at what happened to Gulalai. What did she do? She just questioned policies. She asked for accountability. And what has happened to her and her family? This is happening to each member of the PTM and the supporters. So I think that Pakistan has to change the suicidal policies. Pashtuns have to stand up and take responsibility, but a lot has to take place outside as well, because I feel that there's a lot of attack on those voices that are questioning the policies. So support from the outside is needed. I'm surprised that we have all these human rights groups. We have United Nations, the EU and others, but nobody is really interested in sitting with the Pashtuns and talking to them. This is quite, it's a Pashtun genocide that is going on, and it has to stop.
Right. With this, I'm just going to come to the last question, and then we will wrap up the debate and the discussion, and we will read some of the comments that we have. We have around 110 people still logged in. Gulalai, as Afrasiab Saab mentioned about the regional politics between Pakistan and Afghanistan and the Doha talks, and Bushra Sahiba mentioned the role of PTM and then the civil society, the failure of the politicians within the country. And then, as she rightly mentioned, these organizations that are based out in the West, and you have been now in exile in the US. You are in one of the countries that is involved and responsible for what is happening in the Pashtun region. Since 9/11 and even before, during the 80s, when the war against the Soviets happened, you're also, I do understand that you've been very active in the US by trying to raise awareness about the Pashtun issues and the Pashtun persecution in Pakistan, and talking and bringing Pashtuns into the conversation, into the fold. What has been the response? What do you see? Right now we understand that the US is going through its own transition also, but there is definitely the Pentagon, there's definitely the military strategy which is beyond this transition, and perhaps we might see, every time we've seen that under Obama, under Bush, and then during Trump, there has been somewhat of an extension of these policies. So we might see Joe Biden also perhaps having an extension of the similar policies. It might change. Let's hope for that. But how do you see the engagement level there? Do the people in Washington, D.C., sitting there, in the US, at the UN, are they aware of the fact that they need to talk to people like you, people like Bushra Sahiba, Afrasiab Saab, and not to the Pakistani government that is a player and a beneficiary in all of this war economy?
Thank you, Taha, for the question. I think that there is, the way I see it, that there's indifference of the international actors towards what is happening to Pashtuns. And I think the Pakistani authorities have also very successfully been able to sell the same kind of narrative which they have been selling to the mainstream Pakistan, that is equating Pashtun with the Taliban and presenting Taliban as the legitimate representatives of the Pashtuns. So the stereotypes that we see in the mainstream of Pakistan about Pashtuns, they can equally be seen. Internationally. What is really disappointing for a human rights activist like me is the indifference of international human rights organizations and the United Nations. I do not think that it is about lack of awareness about what's happening. I think it's about the lack of political will to step in and protect Pashtuns and to protect Pashtuns human rights activists, and to take a stand and to support movements like Pashtun Tahfuz movement, because they have these international powers, they have their own interests We have seen that the United Nations, which act as a champion of democracy all over the world, and it keeps on sending its troops to every other country in the world to for democracy. We have seen that how they have been supporting military dictators in Pakistan, how they have been supporting military leadership in Pakistan. And we have, even in the recent visit of Imran Khan to the US last year when I was in hiding, I remember that the US gave a huge welcome to the Chief of Army Staff who was accompanying Imran Khan. We have seen repeatedly that the leadership of different countries from US or the European countries, they come and they meet with the Chief of Army Staff, they meet with the military leadership, bypassing the political leadership. Even this pattern that was so disappointing, that the same pattern has been even now followed by the anthropologists, by the entrepreneurs, for like Bill Gates. He's a huge donor, and he keep on giving donations to different countries in his for polio vaccination campaigns at Pakistan and different other healthcare initiatives. So when he wanted to speak to Pakistan about polio campaign, instead of speaking to the someone from the healthcare department or someone from the health ministry, Bill Gates spoke to the Chief of Army Staff. So even even people who work on healthcare issues like healthcare, they are now speaking to the military dictators, to the military dictators or military leadership in Pakistan. So the international community is strengthening the political power of military in Pakistan by engaging with them. They are discrediting our be like Imran Khan, be him a selected or an elected leadership. I think that he should be the one, and the politicians should be the one who should be engaged, but it is not happening. And by doing this, the international community is discrediting our parliament, they are discrediting our elected leaders, and they are giving more credibility to the military. So, and also when we speak about the regional situation, the international community played a huge role in legitimizing militants, in legitimizing terrorists. Taliban are terrorists. They are not representatives of Pashtuns. They are not political actors, and they should not be treated as political actors. But the international community has given political credibility to the militants, to the terrorists, by bringing them on table, by releasing them from the prisons, by making them decision makers of Afghanistan, and by trying to hand over Afghanistan to these terrorists, and by sidelining the democratically elected leadership of Afghan government. And Pakistan is equally responsible. Pakistan is equally culprit in it. So the international community has been quite disappointed. The Pashtun civil society is not part of the debate internationally or locally. We have seen there is a huge Pashtun diaspora in Europe. There's a huge Pashtun diaspora in the US as well, and there are a number of community organizations of Pashtuns, of Afghans all over the world, but we have seen that they have never been engaged in any kind of discussions or dialogue about the future of Afghanistan, while decisions are made here in the DC. Similarly, the international human rights community has also not been very responsive to the human rights crisis in Pakistan. But the same behavior, we have seen same attitude in the Pakistani-led, except HRCP and except few human rights organizations. Most of the human rights organizations, they are not extending any kind of solidarity. They're not extending any kind of support to the Pashtun human rights activists. Those PTM is it's a civil rights movement. It's a human rights movement, and all human rights and civil rights are supposed to be political. Any human rights struggle cannot be apolitical. That we have seen that human rights organizations have been very reluctant, because they don't want, like my organization Aware Girls was suspended by the on the whim of ISI, we were not let work. And most of the organizations, they don't want their funds and their donations to be suspended. So for the sake of their own, for the sake to keep on working and to keep on getting funds, they are not supporting a very genuine human rights movement. And I think that this is those who claim to work, those who take donations from international community on peace building, those who take donations from the international community for human rights, if they're not standing with the genuine human rights movement and with human rights activists, then this is the biggest betrayal to the human rights movement.
Right. Thank you so much for all of that. I'm just going to go through some of the comments that I've seen, and then perhaps if any of you would like to add something. So one of the first comments that we have was, the last comments we had was from Khalid Ijaz, who says that why do they pick people without informing their families? A lot of nations, they're in Pakistan, but they do mistreatment with Pashtuns. They have been suppressed and targeted. Why have they been killed? Why Sanullah Ihsan was permitted to leave the country? They blame that he's done an APS attack and then they let him go. That's just a comment, nothing, not a question. Then we had something from Ali Jan, who says, who addresses a question to Bushra Sahiba. What is your message for our youth not to become part of any Cold War between US and China? As you just mentioned, that Pashtun belt may suffer again because of Cold War between China and the US. Perhaps we can come back to that, Bushra Sahiba, later on. I'm just going to read out the other questions and other comments that we have. We also had something from let's see, this is something from Siraj Khan, who says, what's the way forward for Pashtun nationalist parties and other oppressed nations and regional parties? Then we have, okay, I'm just going up again a little bit. Then we have something from Gul Bukhari. Gul Bukhari is a friend. She's sent a message. It was up here. Wait, hold on a second. Yes, there it is. It's how do they see the fact that non-elected leaders, Maulana Asfandiar Achakzai, disqualified leaders Nawaz Sharif, and never ran politicians Maryam and Asifa, leading a movement from which Maulana has expelled the only actually elected member of the House. I think she's talking about Mohsin Dawar, and she says irony much. It's more of a comment. Then we have a message from Yasir Jahangir Pasha, who says that we saw what has happened to political and judicial leadership that raised the questions of missing persons. We did talk about that, about how missing persons and talking about missing persons is an issue also. Then we had another question from On Raza, which is about how can we respond concisely to popular criticism against PTM and its so-called anti-military and anti-national image that is often promoted to the masses. So these are some of the few comments that I read. There are lots more, but I'm just picking out some of them. If perhaps, if Bushra Sahiba, if you could tell us if you have a message, as someone was asking, and this, this idea of this image building of PTM or this criticism that comes to PTM, how do you look at all of this?
Look, first of all, what PTM has done, Imran Khan was brought in with the support of the military, and what he did was depoliticize the Pashtun youth. And in fact, they were a bit successful also, but PTM brought in and politicized the youth, and that is why there's so much anger, because PTM changed the way Pashtun youth are now engaging with politics. They're asking questions, they are quite aware of what is going on, and that credit goes to the PTM and the PTM's movement, because they started, it's the only platform where the victims can come and speak to the crowds. You see families of missing persons given representation. You see women speaking. in the Jalsas. So I feel that there's a lot that has happened in the past few years where Imran Khan tried to depoliticize our youth, but that has changed. And I think that the Pashtun youth right now will have to, and the other thing I'd like to also say is PTM has also influenced the Sindhi, the Saraikis, the Punjabi youth, the Baloch, and inspired the youth. Whenever I go to Sindh or to other parts, I mean, most of the time, the discussions are around PTM and PTM's message. So the Pashtun youth will also have to be very watchful. They need to engage, they need to debate. And as far as criticism is concerned, I feel that, all movements need to debate. And I mean, if the problem here is that we don't allow the PTM leaders to come on mainstream media, but the propaganda against PTM is allowed space, primetime space. And that is why there's a lot of misunderstandings or about the movement. It's a non-violent movement. I see it as a continuation of the Bacha Khan's non-violent movement for rights. So I think that the Pashtun youth are quite aware right now. I mean, go to remote areas, they turn off internet services wherever PTM is holding a jalsa. Mainstream media does not give coverage, yet people find out. I mean, I've seen when we were in Moovemint, and there women were talking about PTM and the PTM's message. How do they get the message? It is because people sit there and discuss and debate, and families are talking about it. So I personally am hopeful that the youth, Pashtun youth, will be more aware, and they'll build pressure within their political parties to ensure. And like I said earlier also, that PTM has raised the bar high, and there's a lot of pressure. The ideological worker within ANP or PKMAP, MAP and other political parties, they're building pressure on their leaders to speak up and take up these issues. PDM will have to take up the issues. I mean, they've expelled Mohsen Dawar. I feel very sorry that the Pashtun leaders supported it. And they should have actually sided with Mohsen Dawar, but they felt insecure and they wanted to please the selectors. So basically, they will ultimately, I mean, if PDM is going to be successful in the struggle for restoration of democracy, we'll have to take up the Baloch issues. They'll have to take up the Pashtun issues. They can't ignore. It can't be just focusing on a puppet. And that is what they have been doing so far after Mohsen was expelled.
Right. Just a few more comments and then we will call it a wrap. There is something from a message from Israr Ahmed, who is written in a Roman Urdu. He says that does he think, he wants to ask Khattak Saab if there is any hope from the judiciary, given the fact that Waqar Seth, the recent judge who passed away. We have, then there is a message from, let me just see. Then there was a question from Idris Khan, which was about, do you think that bringing Taliban on the tables is the crisis of the liberal world order? I mean, more so of the neoliberal world. We did talk about that a little bit. Afrasiab Saab, if you could talk about from the perspective of just the judiciary. I mean, we've talked about the politicians, the political circles. We've talked about we've talked about the PTM, the civil rights movement, the role of international sort of community. What do you think in Pakistan, the judiciary? Do you have any hope from them when it comes to all the issues that Pashtuns are facing? Perhaps that way we could answer Israr's question.
Well, after Ziaul Haq's martial law, Pakistan was a hybrid democracy, where it had a facade of democracy, elections, etc., but it was controlled democracy. The generals would control it from behind the scenes. But recently, particularly after 2014, there has been a creeping coup in Pakistan, which has led to the overthrow of civilian government, and we have seen a hybrid martial law, which has rigged elections in 2018 and imposed this puppet government. And I think the hybrid martial law is not popular. It has also not delivered in economy, in governance, price hikes and other things. But you see, it has damaged institutions very much. It's worse than a regular martial law. Because in regular martial law, these institutions are paralyzed, they are kept to a side. But here they are being cleansed. There's witch hunt in judiciary. We have seen judges who are independent are being thrown out of judiciary. We have seen Mr. Shaukat Aziz Siddiqui was shown the door. We have seen Qazi Faiz Isa. We saw that Justice Viqar, a very brave judge, independent judge, honest judge, he was also superseded. He was not elevated to the Supreme Court. There are other judges who are being sidelined. So you see, this hybrid martial law is the worst because it has discredited Parliament by using through its puppets. It is also weakening judiciary, unfortunately. And for political parties to reform, they will have to come clean on all these issues. They will have to say no to hybrid martial law, and they will have to have a transition. You see, we have our own transitions experiences like after Ziaul Haq's martial law in 1985, after the 8th Amendment of the Constitution, we had a transition which did not lead to a genuine democratic and constitutional system. Then another effort was made after the Charter of Democracy, which was signed in 2006, and we had elections in 2008. There was an effort again at a transition to democracy. Again, it was subverted in the middle in 2014. So we can learn from our own experiences. Then we can also learn from the best international practices. There was long martial law in Turkey, but Turkey is no more under martial law. How did they do it? Similarly, Indonesia has come out of martial law. South Korea has come out of martial law. So we need to study these, and I think this time round, the Pakistan Democratic Movement should have a plan for transition to democracy and putting martial law forever out of our political systems, because it is not a political system, and militarization has damaged our country, has damaged Pakistan. We have not been able to focus on economic development. You see, look at Afghanistan, for example, our foreign policy. Iran has built a railway line to Afghan border. It has reached Herat. Uzbekistan has built a railway track to Mazar Sharif, the city of Mazar Sharif. But from Pakistan, not even a single kilometer of railway track has been built in the last many decades, because it's not priority. The priority is exporting Taliban. So you see, militarization has really damaged Pakistan, and Pakistan needs to come to good relations with neighbors and also at peace with itself, and focus on economic development, social development, distribution of wealth, particularly bringing women in politics, in decision making, education. You see, no country can progress without women taking active parts in development. So these are issues that Pakistani democracy faces, And this is the best way for Pakistan to opt for a peaceful, democratic, progressive future. The other way is towards a chaos, towards self-destruction, and towards wars in the region, wars of attrition, which can lead to greater regional and international conflicts.
Definitely. Thank you for summing that up and sort of broadening our sort of view of, because we were basically focusing on the issue of Pashtuns themselves, but definitely the issue of Pashtuns who are at the forefront of this sort of proxy war by the Pakistani military, the export of the militancy to regional sort of conflicts in Pakistan, in Afghanistan and in Kashmir. The Pashtuns have been at the forefront of it, the victims of it, and if the first step should be to rehabilitate and sort of reach out to the Pashtuns, as we're seeing that there are these platforms already that exist, and the Pakistani government and the Pakistani military, and definitely the government, as Gulalai mentioned, that the government needs to take up charge, and the military needs to be, as we agree with this, that the military needs to go into the background. The international players also need to know and understand this and have the political will to push Pakistan towards more of a civilian setup, a civilian democracy, and with that we will see a peaceful sort of Pakistan, because if Pashtuns are peace, the regions of Pashtun areas are in peace, Afghanistan is in peace, the region is in peace, definitely Pakistan will bear and see its fruits also, and we'll see a prosperous and better Pakistan. Thank you all of you for joining us once again, Gulalai, Ismail, Afrasiab Saab, Bushra Gohar Sahiba, for this very important and very insightful discussion for me to learn and hear from the different generations that we're seeing, the different perspectives that we're seeing. We had a lot of live participation, so thank you for all of those who joined us. We had also a few trolls, definitely, but those trolls are always, I always tell people that we should stop paying attention to the trolls, because they're not organic, they are definitely organized. And that's why I had to sort of moderate while I was talking to you and listening to you. I also had to moderate the chat and ensure that these trolls do not create the noise that they want to. But the idea is to create this conversation, and we're so thankful for all of those who joined us. And this talk will be available on our Facebook page, on our Twitter page, and on our YouTube and website for anyone to revisit it, because a lot of things that were discussed here today are things that we can learn from, all of us can learn from. So thank you everyone again for joining us, and we will definitely redo this again and keep doing this again on South Asia Press. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.